Hello guys, welcome back to Lynn's Corner, the place where we learn physics in a simple and meaningful way. Today we are going to dive into one of the most fascinating topics in physics, mechanics, and heat, momentum, impulse, and collisions. Now, at first, this topic might sound abstract, all these symbols, equations, and forces, but trust me, momentum is something that exists everywhere around us. Think about it. Every time a car moves, a football is kicked, or even when a rocket launches into space, momentum is there. It's the reason why a small bullet can have such a large effect, or why airbag in cars can actually save lives. In this chapter, we will explore three main ideas: what momentum really means and how it's related to the Newton's laws, how impulse can change an object momentum, and how objects behave when they collide, whether they bunch apart, stay together, or transfer energy in surprising ways. By the end of this topic, we will see that momentum is not just a physics formula, it's a principle of motion that engineers, scientists, and even game developers use every day. So, sit back, relax, and let's take off just like this rocket into the world of momentum, impulse, and collisions. So before we jump into the details, let's take a quick look at the outline for today's lessons. This topic will take us on a journey that connects motions, energy, and force, all the way from simple system to real engineering application like rockets. We will start with the center of mass, which help us understand how the motion of an entire object or system can be represented by one point, even if it's made up of many parts. Then we will look at Newton's second law for a system of particles, which show us how force act not just on one object, but on an entire system. This naturally leads us into the definition of linear momentum, one of the most important quantities in physics because it connects mass and velocity in a single concept. Next, we will discuss collision and impulse, how a force acting over time can change momentum, and how this applies in real life, like airbags or hammering a nail. We will then talk about conservation of linear momentum, which is a powerful principle. Momentum is always conserved in an isolated system. This explains how motion transfers from one object to another during a collision. After that, we will move into momentum and kinetic energy in collisions to see how energy behaves during elastic and inelastic impact. Then we will analyze two types of collisions: elastic collision in one dimension and in two dimensions. And finally, we will end with a very exciting topic: system with varying mass, the rocket. This part shows how conservation of momentum explains rocket propulsions, how ejecting mass backward pushes the rocket forward. So that's the roadmap for these sessions, from basic motion to rocket science, all built on one unifying principle: momentum. Alright, let's start with the first fundamental concept: center of mass. The center of mass is a special point in any system of particle. It's the point that moves as if all the system's mass were concentrated there and all external force were applied at that point. In other words, if you want to describe the motion of a complex object like a bat, a rocket, or even a person jumping, you can treat it as if the whole mass were located at its center of mass. For example, please look at this picture. Yeah, when a baseball bat is thrown into the air, it spins and tumbles, but if you trace the black dot, yeah, that's the center of mass, it follows a smooth parabolic path. Okay? Even though the bat itself rotates, the center of mass moves just like a simple projectile. That's why in physics and engineering, we often analyze the motion system by focusing only on their center of mass. Now let's talk about how we find it. For a system of two particles, the positions of the center of mass along the x-axis can be found using this formula. This formula tells us that the heavier mass contributes more to the positions of the center of mass. So, if one object is much heavier, the center of mass will be closer to it. For many particles in three dimensions, please follow this formula. And for continuous or solid bodies, we replace the summation with integration and will be x center of mass equals to 1 per m integral x dm and so on. This allows us to calculate the center of mass for any solid object regardless of its shape. So in summary, the center of mass help us simplify complex system into a single point of motions, a concept that becomes very powerful when we study momentum and collision later on. Now that we understand what the center of mass is, let's talk about how it moves when force act on a system. This brings us to Newton's second law for a system of particles. Newton's second law doesn't just apply to a single object, it also applies to an entire system of particles, like a car, a rocket, or even your own body. Mathematically, we can express it as this formula. This means that the acceleration of the center of mass depends only on the net external force acting on the system, not on the internal forces. Let's think about this inside the system. Yeah, particles can push or pull each other, but those internal forces always cancel out in pairs. So they don't change how the whole system moves. Only external forces like gravity, friction, or a push from outside can change the motion of the center of mass. And we also assume that the system is closed, meaning no mass enters or leaves the system while we are analyzing it. To visualize this, please look at this image. This image about fireworks rocket, yeah, when it explodes in midair, each fragments fly off, yeah, everywhere in different direction. But the center of mass of all fragments keep following the same smooth parabolic path as the original rocket. The explosion is caused by internal forces, but does not affect the motion of the center of mass. Only gravity does. Another beautiful example is the ballet leap shows below this one. Yeah. When a dancer leaps into the air, she moves her arms and legs to create elegant shapes. Even though her body changes shape, meaning the center of mass inside her body shifts, the overall center of mass of the system still follow a perfect parabolic trajectory, just like a projectile. So, the key takeaway is this: no matter what happens inside a system, its center of mass moves as if all the mass were concentrated at the point and all external forces acted on it. And this idea will be crucial when we discuss momentum and impulse because it helps us analyze how an entire system moves, even when internal interaction are complex. Now, let's talk about one of the most powerful and elegant quantities in mechanics, linear momentum. We define momentum as vector P equals mv. Yeah. This simple equation tells us that momentum is the product of mass and velocity, but conceptually it represents how much motion an object has. In everyday terms, it's not just about how fast something moves, but how hard it is to stop it. For example, a small ball and heavy truck can have the same speed, but clearly it takes much more force to stop the truck. That's because the truck has much more momentum. Now, momentum is closely tied to force. From Newton's second law, we can write vector F equals to dp per dt. This means that the rate of change of momentum of an object is equal to net force acting on it. So when a force acts on an object, it changes its momentum. That's actually the core idea behind impulse, which we will talk about later. Now, when we move from a single particle to a whole system of particles, the same principle still applies. We define the linear momentum of a system as vector p equals to m vector p, center of mass, where big M is the total mass of the system, and vector v, center of mass, is a velocity of the center of mass. And again, the net external force on the entire system is F equals to dp per dt. So the motion of a system center of mass depend only on external forces, just like we saw before. Now let's connect this to real life. Yeah, please look at this figure. Two cars colliding on a frictionless surface. Yeah, before the collisions, both cars have their own momenta, say P1 and P2. Okay, after crash, even though they may deform or bunch apart, the total momentum of the system remains the same as long as no external forces like friction or air drag interfere. Okay, that's why we can analyze collision using conservation of momentum. It's a law that holds true even in complex interaction. So remember, momentum is not just a number, it's a measure of motion that tells us how forces and movement interact in the real world. Now that we know what momentum is, let's see what happens when a force acts for only a short time. In other words, during a collision. The key idea here is that momentum of an object cannot change unless an external force acts on it. During collisions, that force is usually very large, but it acts over a very short time interval. This short but intense force produces a big change in momentum, and that's where impulse comes in. Let's start from Newton's second law. From this formula, if we integrate this over the time of contact, we get the impulse G. And according to the impulse momentum theorem, delta P equals to momentum. Okay, that means the change in momentum of an object equals the impulse applied to it. We can think of impulse as a package of force over time. If the same change in momentum happens, we can either apply a large force for a short time or a smaller force for a longer time. This principle is used everywhere in engineering and safety design. For example, in car airbags, they don't reduce the change in momentum. The car still stops, okay? But they increase the time during which the force acts. So the average force on the passenger becomes much smaller. That's what saves lives in collisions. Mathematically, the average force during a collision can be written as P average, yeah, these equations. On the right figure, this one, a baseball hit by a bat, yeah. The bat exert a huge force on the ball in a very short instant, reversing its direction. That's a massive change in momentum caused by impulse. And in a series of collisions, like a stream of projectile hitting a target repeatedly, each impact transfer momentum, and we can calculate the average force by considering how much momentum is transferred per second. So the key takeaway is impulse connects force, time, and momentum. Whenever something changes motion rapidly, like impact, jumps, or explosions, impulse is the hidden quantity controlling how much momentum changes. Okay, so now that we understand how force can change momentum through impulse, let's look at very special situations when there is no external force acting on the system. In that case, something amazing happens. P equals to constant. Okay, this is called the law of conservation of linear momentum. It says that if no net external force acts on a system of particles, the total momentum of the system remains constant. We can think of it as the momentum version of Newton's first law, yeah? Instead of motion stays the same unless acted on, we now say momentum stays the same unless acted on by external force. Now, inside the system, particles can still push and pull each other. Thus are internal forces. But internal forces always occur in equal and opposite pairs, according to the Newton's third law. So while they can change the momentum of individual parts, they cannot change the total momentum of the system. In other words, even if the particles within the system interact, collide, or exchange energy, the total momentum when you add up all the parts stay the same as long as no external force interferes. That's why we say the system must be closed and isolated. Closed meaning no mass enter or leaves the system. Isolated meaning no external forces act on it. This principle is incredibly powerful. It's used to analyze all type of collisions, explosion, and propulsion system. For example, in a car crash, if we ignore friction with the ground, the total momentum of both cars before and after the collision remains constant. Or think about a rocket. As it ejects exhaust gases backward, the rocket itself moves forward. That's momentum conservation in actions. So remember this key idea. In the absence of the external force, total momentum is conserved. Okay? And this simple statement explains everything from billiard ball collisions to fireworks to rocket launch. Okay? Now that we understand that momentum is always conserved in a closed system, let's see what happened to kinetic energy during collisions. This led us to the two main types of collision, elastic and inelastic. Let's start with the first one, elastic collisions. In elastic collision, the total kinetic energy of the system remains constant. Okay, it's conserved. That means no kinetic energy is lost. It's simply redistributed between the colliding objects. We often use this as ideal model because it makes the math simpler and help us understand real collision approximately. However, in real life, some energy is always transferred into other forms such as sound, heat, or deformations. Still, many collisions, like billiard ball or gas molecules colliding, are close enough to being elastic that this model works well. Now, in elastic collisions, some of the kinetic energy is transformed into other forms. Energy doesn't disappear, but it's converted into heat, sound, or internal energy. However, momentum is still conserved. Mathematically, for a one-dimensional case, we can write m1 v1 plus m2 v2 in initial equals to m1 v1 plus m2 v2 in final. This shows that the total momentum before and after collision is the same, but the kinetic energy has changed. And the most extreme case in the completely inelastic collisions, this is when the two objects stick together after the collision and moves as one combined mass. This situation has the greatest loss of kinetic energy, even though momentum is still conserved. We can express it as m1 v1 in initial equals to m1 plus m2 v. V is their shear velocity after sticking together. This type of collision is common in car crashes, clay blobs sticking together, or a bullet embedding itself in a block of wood. So, remember, momentum is always conserved, but kinetic energy might not be. When kinetic energy is also conserved, it's a elastic collision. When it is not, it is inelastic. Okay? Now let's take a closer look at 2.2 important type of inelastic collisions. We have inelastic and completely inelastic collisions. So let's start with this one. Here we have two objects, yeah, body 1 and body 2, with mass m1 and m2. Before the collision, each one has its own velocity, v1, this one, and v2. After the collision, they both continue moving, but with different final velocity, v1 final and v2 final. Here, momentum is still conserved, that never change. m1 that we know before, m1 v1 initial plus m2 v2 initial equals to m1 v1 final plus m1 m2 ya, m2 m2 v2 final, m1 m1 v1 final to m2 v2 final. But some of the kinetic energy is transformed into other forms like heat, vibration, or deformation. That's why in most real-world collision, like um, cars bumping or a ball hitting in the ground, they are inelastic. You will hear the sound, feel the impact. That's the energy leaving as heat and sound. Yeah. Now on this figure, we see completely inelastic collisions. This is an extreme case of inelastic collision where the two objects stick together after impact and move as one combined body. We can represent that as m1 v1 initial equals to m1 plus m2 v. Okay. Even though the kinetic energy loss is the largest possible, momentum is still conserved. This is the kind of collision that happens when, for example, a bullet embeds itself into a block of wood, or when the two cars lock together after a crash. So, to summarize, in elastic collisions, object bounce off but lose some kinetic energy. In completely inelastic collisions, objects stick together and move as one, with the greatest kinetic energy loss. Both obey momentum conservation, but the difference lies in how much kinetic energy is lost. Alright, um, now we will focus on what happens to the center of mass during a completely inelastic collisions when two bodies stick together after impact. Something interesting happens here. Even though the object collide and merge, the velocity of the centers of mass remains unchanged throughout the process. We can express the center of mass velocity as v center of mass, this is a vector, equals to vector p per m1 plus m2 equals p1 plus p2 in initial, m1 and m2. What this means is that the motion of the center of mass depends only on the total momentum and the total mass of the system, not on what happens internally, like the collision itself. In other words, even during the violent collisions, while energy is lost and objects deform or stick together, the center of mass continues moving smoothly at the same velocity as before. Please look at this diagram. Here, a projectile of mass m1 moves toward a stationary target of mass m2. Before the collision, m1 has velocity v1, okay, initial, and m2 at rest, and the center of mass is somewhere between them, moving forward with velocity v center of mass here. When the collision occurs and the two bodies stick together, they move as one with velocity v, big V. Notice that v is the velocity of the combined mass is equal to the center of mass velocity. Okay? So even though the collisions look sudden and chaotic, the motions of the center of mass stays perfectly smooth and constant. That's the beauty of this concept. It helps us see that from the center of mass frame, the system behaves in a simple, predictable way, even if things look messy in the lab frame. So, in summary, in a completely inelastic collisions, the center of mass velocity doesn't change. It keeps moving at a constant rate, no matter what happens internally. Yeah. Now we are ready to explore one of the most elegant situations in collision physics, elastic collisions in one dimensions. This is a special case, yeah, where both momentum and kinetic energy are conserved. That means the total amount of motions and total mechanical energy stay exactly the same before and after the collisions. They are just redistributed between the two bodies. So let's consider the setup shown in this figure. We have two objects, M1 and M2. Object 1, the projectile, moves toward object 2, the target. Yeah, which is initially at rest. So before collisions, we have v1 initial equals to some velocity and v2 initial equals to 0. After they collide, both objects move but possibly at different final speeds. v1 final and v2 final. Now, because momentum is conserved, we can write m1 v1 initials equals m1 v1 finals plus m2 v2 final. And because it and elastic collisions, kinetic energy is also conserved. Yeah, half m1 v1 square equals half m1 v1 final square final plus half m2 v2 square final. Okay, these two equations together are the foundation for analyzing one-dimensional elastic collisions. They allow us to find the final velocities v1 final and v2 final in terms of the masses and the initial velocity. Conceptually, here uh, in elastic collision, energy is not lost as sound, heat, or deformations. It's transferred perfectly between the colliding bodies. This is what happens when we play billiard, yeah, or when gas molecule collide. Each bounce transfer energy, but the total system energy remains constant. So even though the motion of each body change, the total kinetic energy, and total momentum of the system remain perfectly balanced. That's the beauty of elastic collisions. Energy and momentum dance together in perfect harmony. Now that we establish the two conservation laws, yeah, momentum and kinetic energy. So let's see what happens when we combine between momentum and kinetic energy mathematically for elastic collisions in one dimensions. Okay, after doing some algebraic manipulation, we find the following elegant results. P1 final equals to m1 minus m2 m1 per m1 plus m2 v1 initial. Okay, v2 finals equals to 2m1 per m1 plus m2. This equation describes how both objects move after the collisions, depending on their masses and the initial velocity of the moving object. Let's take a moment to interpret what this result actually means physically. So, we can see the special case also, yeah, equal masses. If the two masses are equal, m1 equals to m2, then v1 final equals to 0, v2 final equals to v1 initial. That means the first object stops completely and the second object takes off with the same speed. This is exactly what happened in billiard balls or Newton's cradle. The first ball transfers all its momentum to the second one. Case 2, we have massive target M2 greater than M1. Yeah. If the target is much heavier, like when a ping pong ball hits a wall, then V1 finals equals to minus V1 initial. The small object simply bounces back with nearly the same speed but in the opposite directions, while the massive target barely moves. In case 3, we have massive projectile M1 greater than M2. If the first object is much heavier, um, imagine a truck hitting a small wall, maybe, then the heavy object keeps moving almost unchanged, and the lighter one flies forward at about twice the initial speed of the heavy object. This result show us how mass ratio determine how energy and momentum are shared in a collisions. So, although momentum and energy are conserved together, how they are distributed between the object depends strongly on the relative mass. Up to this point, we will look at elastic collisions where one object was initially at rest. Okay, but in real life, collision often happen when both objects are already moving, like cars meeting head on or billiard ball glancing past each other. So now, let's see what happens when the target is also moving. When we apply the some conservation laws, momentum and kinetic energy, and do a bit of algebra, we get the following general results. V1 final equals to M1 minus M2 per M1 plus M2, yeah, V1 initials plus 2 M2 per M1 plus M2 V2 initial. And in the V2 final equals to 2 M1 per M1 plus M2 plus M2 minus M1 per M1 plus M2 in V2 initial. Okay, these two equations give the final velocities of both objects after an elastic collision in one dimensions, no matter whether the objects are moving toward each other in the same direction or one is stationary. So let's unpack what these terms means. The first term in each equation represents how much of an object on initial velocity it keeps after the collision. The second term represents how much motion it receives from the other object. So we can think of this equation as a kind of velocity exchange system where momentum and energy are redistributed between the two masses. Now, in this diagram, we can see the setup. Object M1 is moving to the right with velocity v1 initial, and object M2, the target, is also moving, but in this case to the left with velocity v2 initial. After the collision, both objects may rebound or continue forward depending on their mass ratio and initial speed. For example, if the two objects have the same mass, they will simply exchange velocities, a result we often see in billiard balls. If one is much heavier, it hardly moves, while the lighter one bounces back or speeds up dramatically. These equations are incredibly powerful. They are used not only in physics lab but also in engineering simulation, yeah, automotive crash analysis, and even particle physics. So the key is elastic collision equation with moving target allow us to predict any one-dimensional impact accurately and universally. Okay, uh, so far we have been analyzing collision that happen in one dimensions, motion only along a straight line. But in reality, most collisions are two-dimensional. For example, think about billiard balls on a pool table. When one ball strikes another, it rarely hits perfectly head on. Instead, it often strikes at an angle, causing both balls to move off in a different direction. That's exactly what we are going to discuss here. Collision in two dimension. In a two-dimensional collision, we still use the same principle of conservation. Conservations of momentum, and for elastic collision, conservation of kinetic energy. The difference is that now we must apply this law along each axis and the y-axis. So we write along x-axis, we have m1 v1 initial equals, okay, and along y-axis we have, and if the collision is elastic, we also conserve kinetic energy as this formula. This is the final, yeah, plus half. Now, in this figure, we see example of what's called a glancing collision. Object M1 comes in along the x-axis, collides with uh, M2, and after collision, they both fly apart, one at angle theta 1 and the other at theta 2. Even though their paths are no longer aligned, the vector sum of their momenta remains the same as before. It's just that the momentum is now distributed between two perpendicular directions. This is important idea in engineering mechanics and particle physics, whether you are studying car crash angle, sport bar rebounds, or particle scattering in accelerator. This same concept applies. Momentum is conserved in every direction. So the essence is in two-dimensional collision, momentum conservation works independently in each axis, and energy conservation ties it all together. Yeah. So let's finish our discussion with one of the most fascinating application of momentum conservation, the motion of a rocket. Unlike collisions, where we deal with the fixed mass, rockets are part of a special class of system called system with varying mass. That's because as the rocket moves, it continuously eject part of its own mass, the exhaust gases, to gain speed. Now, here is the key idea. The rocket and the exhaust gases together form an isolated system. That's mean no external force acts on the system as a whole. So momentum is conserved. We start from that principle. P initial equals to P final. If we express it mathematically, we can write mv equals minus dmu, yeah, plus m plus dm v plus dv. Big M is the mass of the rocket at a given instant. V is velocity. The m is the small mass of fuel expelled backward with velocity u relative to the rocket. To simplify, we define the relative exhaust velocity u equals to p plus dv minus p rel. P rel is the exhaust speed relative to the rocket. Now, after the simplifications, we get what's called the first rocket equation. R VREL equals to MA. R is the rate of mass loss, the rate at which the rocket burns fuel, and R VREL is known as the thrust, or the force that pushes the rocket forward. So the rocket accelerates because of this continuous exchange of momentum. Every small portion of fuel that's pushed backward gives the rocket a small forward kick. Okay, if we integrate this equation over time, that is over the total change of mass from m, initial mass, to final mass, we get the second rocket equation. V final minus V initial equals to V rel ln m initial per m final. This equation tells us something beautiful. The more fuel a rocket burns, the bigger the ratio m initial per m final, the greater the velocity it can achieve. That's why in rocket design, engineers always try to maximize exhaust velocity and minimize structural mass, because those two factors determine how fast and how far a rocket can go. So, in sense, a rocket is a living demonstration of Newton's third law. Yeah, for every actions there is an equal and opposite reactions, expressed through the conservation of momentum. From launching satellites to space exploration, this principle lies at the heart of all modern aerospace engineering. Okay, so that is for today, guys. We have explored how momentum, impulse, and collisions shape the motion of objects, from simple car crashes all the way to the incredible physics of rockets. Remember, physics is not just about the numbers and formulas, it's about understanding how the universe moves. And thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.